How long was I in there?
About 5 minutes.
Why are we not funding this?
When you're still an adorable little baby, you were just bursting with potential. You could decide to be a pilot or a doctor or a journalist. You had the potential to specialize into all sorts of different careers. And as you got a bit older, you got more and more committed down a certain pathway. And the decisions that you made moved you further and further along this pathway, right? Well, it turns out that stem cells operate in a similar way, going from unspecialized to more specialized as they get older. So let me show you what I mean by that over the course of this video. So in skin, for example, this outside layer is the part of our skin that we can see and that we can touch, right? And it's made of these waterproof, pretty rugged epithelial or skin cells. And interestingly, although they are pretty rugged, you're constantly shedding these skin cells. They actually just sort of fall off or get rubbed off during everyday activities, like when you're putting your clothes on. And then the ones from underneath them just sort of move up and take their place. So you shed them and you lose almost 40,000 of them per hour. So if we want to have any hope of keeping our skin, we kind of need a way to replace these cells. And that's where stem cells that live in our skin come in. Actually, our skin cells are shed and replaced so often that it only takes a month for us to have a completely new skin. Like literally 1 month, entirely new skin. It's outrageous. Anyway, deep within our skin, there's this layer of stem cells called epidermal stem cells. And their job is to be continually dividing. So you can see them dividing here, dividing, and making new skin cells that go on to migrate upward as the multiple layers of our skin. And their goal is to eventually replace these ones up here on the outside that get damaged or worn out and fall off.
Our bodies are worn down by trillions of tiny physical processes. Oxygen, radiation from the sun, our metabolism. Our bodies have many mechanisms to repair this damage, but over time they become less effective. So our bones and muscles weaken, our skin wrinkles, our immune system gets weaker. We lose our memory and our senses diminish. There's no such thing as dying of old age. We all die because one of our important parts breaks. The older we get, the more damaged and fragile we become until one or multiple diseases take over and kill us.
Let's look at this guy's femur, his thigh bone, which is where our blood cells are made, inside bone marrow in our bones. So you might know that our red blood cells have a lifespan of about 4 months. So that means that we need to be constantly replacing our red blood cells or we'll run out, right? Well, in our bone marrow, we have what are called hematopoietic stem cells, which are our blood-making stem cells. This is probably the most common use of stem cells in medicine as of now. And you can actually find these multipotent stem cells in most tissues and organs. So, for example, we have multipotent neural stem cells that slowly give rise to neurons and their supporting cells when necessary. And we have multipotent mesenchymal stem cells in a few different places in the body that give rise to bone cells and cartilage cells and adipose cells. So you might be wondering, after seeing our epithelial and our hematopoietic stem cells dividing, why aren't these cells being used up as they divide? And that's a really good question. So stem cells have 2 mechanisms in place to make sure that their numbers are maintained. So their first trick is that when they divide, they undergo what's called obligate asymmetric replication, where the stem cell divides into one so-called mother cell identical to the original stem cell, and one daughter cell that's differentiated. So then the daughter cell can go on to become more specialized, while the mother cell replaces the stem cell that divided initially. The other mechanism is called stochastic differentiation. So if one stem cell happens to differentiate into 2 daughter cells, instead of a mother and a daughter, another stem cell will notice this and makes up for the loss of the original stem cell by undergoing mitosis and producing 2 stem cells identical to the original. So these 2 mechanisms make sure their numbers remain nice and strong.
They use the
stem cells from an unborn fetus. The mother's going to have an abortion anyway. Has the abortion, and rather than discard that fetus, they harvest the stem cells.
Adult stem cells are the most popular and the least controversial.
Now, researchers have found adult stem cells in more tissues than previously thought. Bone marrow, skin, brain, liver, eyes, and this has led to research into using the patient's own adult stem cells to repair damaged organs.
However, there are currently several limitations to using adult stem cells. Adult stem cells are often present in only minute quantities and therefore can be difficult to isolate and purify. Adult stem cells may also contain more DNA abnormalities caused by sunlight, toxins, and errors in making more DNA copies during the course of a lifetime. There has been recent buzz about how scientists can now reprogram adult stem cells to behave like embryonic stem cells, but they are still adulterated cells and may also suffer DNA abnormalities. The use of embryonic stem cells has been a hot topic of public debate, so much so that President George W. Bush banned all federal funding for embryonic stem cell research in 2007. Only to be overturned by President Barack Obama 2 years later. Embryonic stem cells are unadulterated stem cells that can be easily grown in a petri dish and harvested within the first 5 days of development. But they also come with limitations. The ability of embryonic stem cells to form non-cancerous tumors called teratomas is one of their defining traits. It's a frightening one, particularly for those who hope to develop therapies from these cells. What makes fetal stem cells uniquely different is because the fetus provides stem cells harvested from nearly all relevant organs. The fetus contains pure, unadulterated stem cells right out of the gate. After all, these stem cells have only 9 months to create an entire human being. And harvesting them is quite easy. A woman decides that she wants an abortion and then is given the option to have her fetus discarded or donated to science. When fetal stem cells are injected, the idea is that they go into our body's nervous and immune system and hone in on areas that need repairs. I wanted to get a fully comprehensive understanding of how these cells are harvested and tested before being administered to patients. The process begins specifically between 7 and 12 weeks of gestation, where the fetal material from a legal, voluntary abortion with the donor's consent arrives at M-Cell within 2 hours of the abortion procedure. This fetal material then enters M-Cell's biotechnology laboratory. After M-Cell's scientists extract more than a dozen different relevant categories of fetal material in their biotechnology laboratory, the fetal stem cells are immediately sent to the cryopreservation department, where they are then suspended using a special proprietary method. Once the cells are successfully suspended, they are then simultaneously sent to 3 different departments.
Lung transplant is where you need to go. If you think about it, we can ease your dying with medicine. And that's not something I wanted to hear. So going to a different country for treatment sounds a lot better than that.
Fetal stem cells ever become widely used, it will change the entire profit picture of the pharmaceutical industry. Because they don't make their money on well people, they make their money on sick people. And continually pumping drugs of all kinds into them. That is how the medical profession survives, on drugs.
I have not had one pain episode, first time in 18 years. I am totally pain-free and medication-free.
People living with cystic fibrosis most always experience a steady worsening of their disease with time. Yet, Brandon has just gained 7 pounds. And at the time he received his first round of fetal stem cells in December of 2014, his lung capacity was only 16%.
Real close. Almost the same. So 24. Awesome.
And now his lung capacity is at 24%. While fetal stem cells can't repair the genetic mutation that causes cystic fibrosis, it is Brandon's hope that fetal stem cells will prolong his need for a double lung transplant or perhaps avoid the transplant altogether.
Health and Human Services is facing pressure from leading anti-abortion groups to cancel more than $100 million in federal funding for research projects that use fetal tissue. Health and Human Services is soliciting feedback from scientists, anti-abortion groups, and other stakeholders as it reviews programs that use fetal tissue before making a decision on whether to nix funding. Anti-abortion groups say the decision should be easy: eliminate all fetal tissue funding.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to make 2 key points. First, fetal tissue research has saved millions of lives and has the potential for saving millions more. And that's why many Republicans have long supported and should continue to support the use of fetal tissue for research purposes. Second, today's hearing is not part of a serious investigation into fetal tissue research or anything else. 12 states, 3 congressional committees, and a grand jury in Texas have already investigated and found no evidence that Planned Parenthood is seeking to profit from the sale of fetal tissue. Indeed, the only criminal acts uncovered in the course of these investigations have been those of anti-abortion extremist David Daleiden, who is now under indictment in Texas for his role in manufacturing the deceptively edited videos that have fueled the Republicans' latest attacks on women and their doctors. Goldstein, how are we expected to learn and understand the implications of the Zika virus without studying the fetal tissue?
I think that if you want to understand the Zika virus, the most efficient place to start is with the fetal tissue that is infected. That just seems self-evident to me.
Yeah, I mean, isn't it imperative that researchers have access to brain tissue to study the differences between the healthy neurological cells and those potentially infected with microcephaly?
Well, and in particular for figuring out which cell types are infected. It's often forgotten that the brain is made of dozens, if not more, kinds of cells. We don't know which cell type is being infected by the virus, and it's only by surveying the landscape that we'll get any clues.
The World Health Organization has now labeled the Zika virus as public health emergency of international concern. What is your view of preventing the use of fetal tissue research to study and hopefully stop this growing public health emergency?
I think that would be sticking your head in the sand.
Thank you. Would not having fetal tissue as a resource in this study potentially delay finding a cure?
It would absolutely delay it. I think you have to go to the source if you want to understand what's going wrong.
Going back to the name of this committee, this type of research could lead to treatments and cures that benefit infant lives, could it not?
That would be the hope. There's never any guarantee with research that we're going to get to where we want to go. But we're going to give it a good, solid try, and we have to have appropriate tools.
This type of, beyond Zika virus, fetal tissue is important for research into other conditions that impact infant and fetal development. Is that correct? And I'm wondering if you could name what else we might be investigating.
Well, another interest in my lab is in a disorder called Niemann-Pick type C1, which is a devastating cholesterol transport disorder that kills kids in their first or second year of life. We use fetal astrocytes in our investigation of that disorder as well. We've recently discovered what I hope will be 2 drugs that may be effective. We need to get into clinical trials to find out, but it's the sort of thing that you could imagine doing on multiple occasions down the line. Again, research is not a guarantee, but we have to go through the door and look in order to find out.
Thank you, and I yield back.
Ms. Black, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I thank the panelists for being here. I think it is really ironic that we sit here and talk about how we will benefit children, and at the same time, we're talking about how it's okay to abort a baby and, excuse me, and to dissect it and take out its body parts and use that for research. But at the same time, we talk about how this will save babies. So it's very ironic. Do we want to save babies or we not want to save babies?
Abortions for all. Very well. No abortions for anyone. Abortions for some, miniature American flags for others.